Great, thank you. I really hate to cut in over the music, but I actually think as pleasant as that is, that the conversation is going to be even more pleasant. So welcome, folks, to today's Enlightening Lunch, the second of the semester, and an ongoing one in a series of Enlightening Lunches offered by the School for the Future of Innovation and Society, themed this year around issues around transitions to justice. It is a real pleasure today to welcome two folks who have been introduced to me, and I'm just meeting them for the first time, by Michael Bennett, who unfortunately we've had to say farewell to. For those of you who have not known Michael Bennett, who's been part of our community for 5 or 6 years, has gone on to different, and we sincerely hope better scene for him at University of Illinois, Chicago. But before Michael left, he did connect us with Chandra Méndez-Ortiz and Ceci Méndez-Ortiz. And they are here today to talk about radical imagination for racial justice. Chandra is an artist and educator who creates work and collaborative experiences that use an historical lens to share insight, create energy, and build momentum in addressing issues of social justice, access, and equity. And Chandra is the director of Artward Bound at MassArt. Ceci is an artist and educator as well, whose artistic voice and community building practices advance cultures of belonging, justice, and joy. Ceci's in her 11th year as executive director of the Center for Art and Community Partnerships at MassArt. And like I said, they are here to talk to us about radical imagination for racial justice. This is really an incredibly nice topic for us, both in the context of the theme that we're working on this year in the Enlightening Lunches of transitions to justice, but also because of the connections that Michael and other of our faculty and students have in what we usually refer to as the art science nexus. And as many of you know, ASU is the home to the ASU Leonardo partnership, which is a partnership between ASU and the International Art Science Journal Leonardo and the 501c3 that sits behind that. A number of you are involved in artistic expression and production besides, and so I think hearing about the role of art and transitions to justice is really just spot on for us at this moment. So thank you, Ceci and Chandra, and we're yours.
Thank you so much for having us. We're very excited to be here today. We're excited to be in community, rooted in values, rooted in justice. And really, we're here to tell you a story about what our work has been kind of up to this moment in time. My name is Chandra Méndez-Ortiz. I am the executive director of Artward Bound at MassArt, as Dave has just mentioned, and I'm really excited to be here with you today. I'd like to introduce my partner, Ceci, who will say a little bit about who she is and what she does.
Yeah, thanks all. Really, really a pleasure to be here today. My name is Ceci Méndez-Ortiz, and just so we can get it out the way, Chandra and I are married, full disclosure. You know, we're partners in life, but we also are collaborators at work. We just happen to work in the same place and we're working on the same projects. So like we said, we're going to share a little bit more about the departments at the Massachusetts College of Art and Design that we're coming from, but I direct the Center for Art and Community Partnerships at MassArt. And like we said, we're really, really happy to be here today. The School for the Future of Innovation in Society is such an exciting concept that such a school exists. And what you were saying, Dave, about transitions to justice, we're just really excited to share about our journey in this project and see where and how there's alignment in ideas and visions, and maybe even process and product with the work that you all are envisioning for the futures, our futures. We just want to say thank you. We know how much goes into organizing anything. So thank you, Dave. Thank you to Mike Bennett, who introduced us to you. And we also want to say thank you to folks that up till today, we've only emailed with, but Eliza Robinson and Cindy Dick, Melissa Waite, Michelle Walker, thank you all so much. And to anybody else who is helping to make this possible today, because we know that the behind the scenes is, it's the how of how we do the what. So yeah, we'll be sharing more about that too. But Chandra?
So we're here today to talk about Radical Imagination for Racial Justice, which is a 3-year regranting program to support artists of color to radically imagine racial justice. And so we're here to tell you that story as a regrantor, as a startup, because this is our first time doing this. And we're at this really wonderful moment where we have 16 artists who are part of our first inaugural cohort who are about to embark on their work during this year. But we want to tell you how we got here and what it took for us to get here, really weaving and centering those values at every aspect of our work. We also want to tell you the story and bring some other voices into our conversation. So luckily, we have some of our grantees who are going to be part of our storytelling today. So we're first going to start off with Fabiola Mendez, no relation, who's going to tell you a little bit about her project.
Thanks, Chandra. So I'm going to share my screen and hopefully all will go smoothly here.
Hola, hello everybody. My name is Fabiola Mendez and I am a musician and composer from Puerto Rico. I'm so honored to be here. My project Negrura, which translates to Blackness in Spanish, is an audiovisual experience that aims to create spaces for conversations about colorism, anti-Blackness, discrimination, and racism within our own Afro-Caribbean and Afro-Latinx community. I will be engaging with Latin Quarter Cultural District in Jamaica Plain with the support of Hyde Square Task Force. This project will provide the technical support for Afro-Latinx people to document via audiovisual storytelling their experiences as Black people living in the United States. The video production and screenwriting of the series, which is meant to have 4 episodes, will all be conducted by community members with the support of professionals in the field. As a lead artist, my contribution will be to musically translate those stories into melodies and songs to accompany these micro storytelling videos that will be broadcasted on social media, hopefully during Hispanic Heritage Month. I'm beyond grateful for this opportunity to grow alongside this beautiful community. Thank you and be blessed.
So we're going to be kind of weaving today and kind of going backwards. So you just saw Fabiola say a little bit about what her intention is for her project that is just now starting for this next year. So what we're going to do is kind of take it back to the beginning, because we've been on this journey for about 2 years, actually over 2 years, to kind of get to this moment, right? And as I mentioned earlier, we're a startup, right? And we're also part of a national conversation. So we're going to kind of tell you that part of it too. So as Ceci kind of gets the slide up, I'll tell you what that first slide is going to say. It's going to say that this is Radical Imagination for Racial Justice, which is a multi-year regranting program. What we want to do is empower people of color, artists of color, to see themselves in this opportunity. And they have been helping co-author, co-build this experience with us. This is our website. Everything you're about to see is new, just made, just built, and being adapted in real time. If you want to hear more information or go deeper, please go to our website. And also, if there are questions that come up, I know we're going to have a Q&A at the end, put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat while Ceci is running the slideshow. And basically, we're going to try to do our best to kind of go back and forth and have a good conversation with you about this process. So we're also going to be using, oh, actually, if you can pause on that slide for another second. We're also going to be using some acronyms and some language that I want to make sure that we're all on the same page about. So we're going to be saying ALAANA, that stands for African, Latin American, Asian, Arab, and Native American. We're also going to say BIPoC, which is Black, Indigenous, People of Color. And this grant really centers them and their work to radically imagine racial justice here in Boston. So we are part of a fantastic partnership, both locally and, nationally. So let me tell you a little bit about our local partnership. So both Ceci and we represent Massachusetts College of Art and Design here in Boston. I am the executive director of Artward Bound, which is a 4-year college prep program in the arts for Boston area students who don't have access to the arts. And we want to make higher ed more accessible by providing this pathway. And we also want to diversify the careers in the arts. Ceci will talk a little bit about what she does in terms of directing the Center for Art and Community Partnership, and also talk about our partnership with the City of Boston.
Thanks, Chandra. So as Chandra said, I direct the Center for Art and Community Partnerships, and our mission is really to partner with people and communities within and beyond MassArt to radically expand access to transformative creative experiences. So we do this through working with MassArt student, faculty, staff, and alumni, and collaborating with people of all ages, from youth to teens to elders and everybody in between, at local schools, community-based organizations, businesses, social service agencies, anybody who wants to partner. Our work, the heart of our work, is really in relationships and relationship building. And then the programs and collaborations that we do are all centered around art and design, but with justice at the core. We should also note that for those of you who aren't familiar with, MassArt is the first public higher ed college of art and design in the nation. And we are state funded, state supported, and the only standalone institution. It's a big deal in Massachusetts and in our city of Boston because it's so much about access, and we'll be talking more about that as well. We have an incredible partner at the City of Boston in the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture. Specifically, Chief of Arts and Culture is Cara Elliott Ortega, and she leads MOAC, as it's affectionately called. MOAC has a deep history of programming that includes $500,000 of grant making to artists and organizations of all kinds, commissioning public art through a new 13 million % for Art program, and seeding pilot initiatives such as the Boston Artists in Residence, or Boston AIR program, which is distinct from Radical Imagination for Racial Justice, that really introduces creativity into municipal policy and decision making. So this was this partnership between MassArt and the city is one that has been growing and evolving, and we're really excited for what it means for 2 public institutions in the state of Massachusetts to be doing this work in support of and to amplify the work of artists of color who are looking to radically imagine racial justice in and with their communities.
So like anything good, it takes a team, right? And you're only as good as your team. So let me introduce some other members of our team. So we just introduced ourselves. I would also like to introduce Perpetual Hayfron, who is our program coordinator, as well as Kristen Hines Perkins, who is kind of the manager of budgets from Institutional Advancement.
Great.
And speaking of community and partnership, we're also working with the Surdna Family Foundation, and we're really fortunate to have such a great partner. I remember back 2.5 years ago that they invited us to a conversation to imagine what racial justice could be and what it looked like throughout the nation, rooted in all of our communities. And what was refreshing about it is they didn't have the answer. It was really a conversation and an ideation and an iteration about what that means. And it was basically a year-long conversation that we were a part of. And we're so excited to be at this moment where we're part of a national cohort that's really thinking about justice through philanthropy, what that really means. MassArt in the city of Boston received $1.2 million for bringing radical imagination for racial justice to life. And as I mentioned, it is a national endeavor. We are stewards of resources going to ALAANA BIPoC artists in Boston to radically imagine racial justice in and within their communities. Philanthropy geared towards justice, not charitable giving. It's really about kind of changing the narrative and inviting folks at every level to be part of that change. And we are just really fortunate to have good partners who are also good listeners and good advocates. F. Javier Torres and Robert Smith Jr. Through Surdna's Thriving Cultures program. And it's really about kind of leveraging those relationships. As you all know, it's really all about good relationships, but how do you use those relationships to speak specifically to your region, to your locale, to your community, but to also understand that you're contributing a verse to a national conversation that is so needed, especially around this time of global reckoning around racial justice.
Thanks, Chandra. So just want to kind of aerial view out here for a moment. We've mentioned that this has been a national endeavor, and the organizations that you see on this slide represent basically the 11 regranting organizations or partner organizations. So MassArt in the city of Boston is one of 3 municipal partnerships. So in addition to the city of Boston partnering with us at MassArt, there's also the city of Oakland partnering with a couple organizations in Oakland, California, and the city of Jackson, Mississippi. And those are represented in the blue squares on this slide. The other organizations here you may be familiar with, or maybe less so, but they represent national organizations that are regrantors to artists nationally, and in the case of NALAC, actually to Puerto Rico, inclusive of Puerto Rico. There are organizations here that represent Indian country, the Southern US, Detroit, Michigan, Chicago, Illinois, Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi, and like we said, in New York City. So it's really amazing to be a part of this national cohort as we are learning and growing this initiative, this program in Boston. What does radical imagination for racial justice, or the iterations across the US, look like? Because in different regions and in different locales, there are different contexts and different issues. So we are part of a national cohort where we're actually learning and growing together with the larger group as we bring those learnings, those questions, those critiques, and those ideas to Boston as we work out our program. And we'll go to the next slide.
So it was really great timing, because both the city of Boston and MassArt were kind of looking at themselves and looking at their values and looking at where they are today and where they want to be. MassArt, we're right now like in our 2 years from developing our strategic plan. And there was so much alignment with MassArt and the city and with Surdna. So we're just really fortunate that we've come together to look at RIRJ as a model for philanthropic work around racial justice. And a lot of folks are taking notice. We're getting a lot of folks who are reaching out and kind of asking how we built this, asking us questions about lessons learned. And that's partly why we're here today. Some of our short and long-term goals, both in the city, but also nationally, is really thinking about kind of arts, equity, and impact. Thinking about centering ALAANA and BIPoC artists, really thinking about what the needs are in our communities, good community-based processes, but then also thinking about how they really start to change and leverage different thoughts around municipal practices, policy, and curriculum. So talk a little bit about like this great alignment. You know, everything that we do is rooted in values, right? So RIRJ, which is Radical Imagination for Racial Justice, our guiding values for this regranting program, which is a 3-year endeavor, is focusing ALAANA and BIPoC artists and creatives, strategically centering young people, which is a little different from the national cohort. We really wanted to see young people see themselves in this opportunity. It's not just for young people, but we wanted to make sure that they saw themselves in this opportunity. Designing a process that deconstructs silos by discipline, age, and neighborhood, working from a model of abundance instead of a model of scarcity, making sure that we compensate people for their time, and their labor, building on what has worked, not replicating the status quo. And that really, I want to hold up this idea of labor. So many times folks of color are asked to contribute their labor without fair compensation. We did not want to replicate that process. So basically we started a jobs program. Everybody who's part of this program gets paid for their time. And we do that with equity in mind. We also want to center well-being and joy, which is also something that many of our communities said, what? You're gonna do what? Yes, we want to center your well-being and your joy in this process. That is a practice. And so that's why we kind of incorporated it in as one of our values. And knowing that we all have much to contribute and much to learn. So we're not standing on high with all the ideas. We're constantly in partnership and learning from each other.
So in that spirit of learning and building together, building a program to us meant building a community to build that program. So what this picture here represents a whole bunch of people who've been, and they're just a fraction of the folks of the communities that we've been building over the course of the last year and a half to basically build and ultimately launch RIRJ in Boston. So what does this mean? We had a street team, which was a group of 8 Boston Public School youth and a coordinator who would help us co-create this process and also get the word out to young people across the city to apply for this grant. There's not a lot of grant opportunities that welcome people truly of ages 14 to infinity or whatever. So we really, really needed the young people co-designing this with us at the core. The advisory group was a group of 12 people who were thought partners with us and co-creators of everything from the application, the process, the language, the wording, the website. We'll get a little bit more into that. And then of course we had panelists. We had 2 different community-based panel processes with a total of 24 people who are the ones who made the ultimate decisions about which artists and creatives would receive these grants. The street team, as I mentioned, was fully comprised of high school students. Our advisory group and our panel had youth members as well in those processes. And the idea was that youth could also apply to these programs. So it was really about building these multiple communities and seeing where and how there was overlap. And as Chandra mentioned, every member of the street team, the panel or the panels or the advisory group were paid $1,000 for their participation in this journey, in this process. Part of building radically welcoming and accessible spaces, an accessible process, we did a lot across all of these groups. We did a lot of team building, a lot of workshopping. Again, all this was in service to the launch of the application itself. So there was a lot of foundational building that was really, really rooted in relationships. So we reckoned a lot with language, with definitions, and with meanings across multiple perspectives because we had such a diversity of people involved in this process. You know, it was very iterative. We did a lot of drafting, we did a lot of editing, a lot of rewriting. The pictures that you see here represent, you know, imagine our Google Drive or Word docs as we're kind of, you know, building things like a narrative for the website or the application itself to get feedback, but we wanted to bring this to our groups who were co-building this with us into more accessible and, dare I say, fun ways. So we literally just blew everything up. We made everything big and large, and you know, we got together with food and markers and marked it all up, and things for sure exploded before we were able to kind of narrow down more into what our, you know, ultimate launch would look like. We did a lot of work in pairs, in small teams, and with large group reflection. And ultimately, these processes applied to our communication strategy. How are we going to get the word out about RIRJ? The application itself, how would it be truly accessible? The website narrative, what is this space? What is this that people are going to see? How will they be invited and welcomed into a process? And also the technical assistance for what would be the eventual cohort. What are the artists going to need? We can't just bring them in and bring them on and then say, do your thing. So these are all pieces that we've been building out to support not just the applicants, but the artists themselves.
So let me help us all kind of bring it back to kind of what are the kind of core essential ingredients or the tenets of this program. So we invited artists to this program, Radical Imagination for Racial Justice, and there were 4 key things that they had to consider. Racial justice, how their program or how their project was going to impact and make some change around racial justice. Authentic community collaboration, how not bringing people into an event to bear witness, but to really having people part of that experience and centering community collaboration. Radical imagination, doing things that are kind of outside the box, imagining something different, whether that's a process, a practice, or a product, but really being radical about how they think about their work and their projects, and also centering their and their community's wellness and joy. That right there, I think, is radical to really put that into practice. And we wanted to really center that because so many times for artists of color, that's besides the point. The other thing that we wanted to do is model this. Ceci's taught me a lot about the how of things. I'm much more a product, here it is, it's great kind of person. But the how and the process matters. So we want to show that every time that we get together. So as you guys came in, you heard music. When we were together before COVID times, there would be food, there would be music, you know, this idea of kind of radical welcome, so that you come in and just the air feels different. You can kind of let yourself go, be vulnerable, be yourself, be part of something. Then COVID happened and it was kind of hard for all of us, but we also wanted to say, how do we still hold up those feelings, that space in a virtual space? So music, having a DJ, having things that bring people in, really keeping that spirit of joy and wellness alive and well and nourishing that through the work that we're doing.
Chandra, can you just say a little bit about the expectation for the applicants as well around this area?
Yeah, it's that 20% of their application had to focus on wellness and joy. So that was for, and all of these things were for them to define, not for us to define, right? So in terms of wellness and joy, it could be, I need to get a massage. I need to pay my student loans. I need to get this equipment for me to do my art. I need to get, you know, childcare. However they define it, if it brought them some wellness and joy, that's cool. But it had to be within that application. And 20% was the floor, not the ceiling. The other thing, as I mentioned, we wanted to think about kind of modeling what we're talking about. So we wanted to bring people in and not always be the front of this. So we had a lot of members of our street team, our advisory panel, create our virtual engagements. And so we really thought about access, and welcoming, and that spirit of welcoming into everything we do. Some of the touch points for all applicants in this virtual space, we're really thinking about our language, both in our website, our email, our social, our branding, our marketing, promo video that featured the street team and advisory group members, countless, and when I say countless, I mean countless, office hours to really get people to connect with us one-on-one, to say, I've got this idea, can you give me real feedback without feeling like I'm being judged? Can I run this past you? Can I bring it back to you? And it was really great that people felt heard, people felt seen, people felt supported. And that's what this is all about. We had a youth-led info session, which you see a little clip here. We gave a lot of feedback to the artists about their applications. We had a phase 2 where they came back and applied for the next round. They got more technical support, whether that was a budget template or feedback on their ideas. And now we're in the process of collecting data around the whole arc of the first year so that we can tell that data story. Want to end my part of the talking right now with a quote from one of our advisory group members, Harold Stewart from the Theater Offensive, kind of says this about us, and it is high praise because he's been part of a lot of panels, a lot of boards where authenticity and values and care are not always what you feel, right? It might be an aspiration, but it might not be something that you feel right here. From his perspective, he feels like RIRJ is a game changer in advancing racial politics and realities in the greater Boston area, and that it is a model of how to lead with people-centered intentionality in the grant-making process. We're just so thankful that, people are feeling that, and Howard is one of those folks who are feeling it on a consistent basis.
And in the spirit of what Harold's also saying, right, like how this investment in BIPoC artists and cultural workers as critical change agents can be sustained, and they can be we can support the quality ideas and examinations held by the region's residents. So all this process, what came of this process? It was our hope that there would be a very broad answer to this call. So now I'm going to share a little bit about some stats on some of our data. Whoops. So we feel so blessed and honored that so many artists and creatives saw themselves in the RIRJ opportunity. We received over 300 applications for this opportunity. And remember, I think Chandra mentioned this whole process of building and then launching this spanned right when the pandemic was fierce. And in Boston and in the Northeast, it was fierce. You may remember early on in New York and in the Northeast. So we went, MassArt, for example, we went fully online in March of 2020. And we were just about to launch our application process and website. So all of the touch points Chandra was talking about turned from imagining we were going to do it in person to doing everything online. So you can see the cluster around the city of Boston of where applicants were coming from. This is a breakdown of applicants by race and ethnicity. We gave a lot of combined categories. We also gave people the option to not answer if they didn't want to fit themselves into a box. We generally did this because for city purposes, the city does a lot of tracking of statistical demographic analysis, but you can see the breakdown there of the different races and ethnicities and combinations thereof of those who applied. We're really proud to say that for even though it was we were striving for this, but with everything else we were building as a startup, the materials went out in primarily English. We had a couple things that went out in Spanish, and yet 25% of our applications came from people for whom English was not their first language. And then the pie chart on the right, you can see the range of ages of folks who applied for this opportunity, who saw themselves in this opportunity, who thought, I have a great idea. And not only I have a great idea, but I think somebody else might respond to this too. And some of the feedback that we've gotten from artists, particularly around other processes, is they might like the idea of applying, but the process of applying is so cumbersome, or there are so many barriers, or there's just, it just isn't a fit. So sometimes people reject themselves before they've even applied to a process. But we were excited to see the range of ages of folks who responded to this. We are also most proud of the fact that in the past year, almost 60% of people who applied had not received any funding to support their work. And that in fact, over 150 people had not ever received any other financial support in the previous 3 years. This chart on the right just lists a whole bunch of very Boston local regional awards through both the Mass Cultural Council and fellowships related to that, as well as city and private organizations and other support. So again, we really wanted we don't think people are average, but the average person to see themselves in this and say, I want to put forth my idea because I have ideas for how I can work with my community to make racial justice a reality through my art practice. And Chandra?
So we went on that journey and now we're at the present moment. Yay! We've got our cohort of artists for our inaugural first year. We have 16 artists. If you want to see more about them in depth, please go to our website. In our year one, we have 10 artists who have gotten $1,000, $1,000. And we thought about that through the input of our advisory group about seeding ideas, kind of bringing folks in to an opportunity where they could really kind of put their hands on it in a realistic way. And then we have 6 grantees who received $40,000, and they're all part of our cohort, and they're going to be with us the entire year, doing their projects and learning and building community together. With that said, we want to bring it back and to bring another artist into our space. So I want to introduce Christine Alcindor, who will talk a little bit about her project.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christine Alcindor. I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently a senior in high school, and I'm from Dorchester. So I heard about RIRJ this summer, as most of the artists here did, and I was immediately excited because their values and their mission perfectly aligned with my values and my passions. So anyone that knows me knows I'm extremely passionate about racial justice and really passionate about sparking conversations regarding the importance of diversity and inclusion in order to create change. So as I was sketching my mural, I kept asking myself, what makes being Black so beautiful? Why am I so proud to be a young Black woman in Boston? And when I found the answer to that question, I knew I wanted that to be the focal point of my mural. So that's how I came up with the Beauty of Black Life, which is essentially a set of 2 portable murals that focus on being Black in America, being Black in general, the Black Lives Matter movement, and then also just the beauty of Blackness. So I have a couple goals for this year. I want to spark conversation regarding the switch from non-racism to anti-racism in the predominantly white spaces I've occupied for most of my life. I want to focus on self-care and self-indulgence and invest in myself in order to create change. And lastly, and most importantly, I think I really want to showcase the beauty of Black life and why I am so proud to inhabit this earth as a Black woman. So I'm really excited to work with RIRJ to make my mural a reality. Thank you.
Wonderful. Just want to finish up here with, so where are we now? You've heard from a couple of the artists who've received funding. As Chandra said, you can check out our website, as well as the January celebration where they all talked about their work. Right now, we are in the process of building out this curricular learning year with our cohort. So we want to build out curriculum around racial justice, community collaboration, radical imagination. We want to continue to nurture authentic community engagement with one another and support the artists and creatives and collectives in doing that with their communities as they do their work, and also support them with professional development, which is also connected to a whole other arm of this process, which is partnering with an organization, a local organization in Boston called Dunamis, to support artists with technical support for them. So this could be documentation, this could be support with how to navigate taxes, how to navigate this work and their well-being, a very holistic approach to technical support for these artists throughout this entire year, which they have to realize their work. We also want to support and amplify the artist's work, to share about RIRJ, not just locally and regionally, but nationally and beyond. We have a lot of evaluation to do, a lot of lessons to learn to apply to the build out of years 2 and 3 of this program. And then of course there's the, and then what? There's always the, we're grounded in the present, but it's always very future thinking and feeling as well. And ultimately that advocacy, the connection to the national cohort and the strategic movement building for policy shifts around how arts and culture can actually see the ideas and create scalable prototypes for how arts and culture work can actually support us all in building more just futures. So we invite you to please join us on the journey. These are our hashtags, hashtag RIRJ Boston and hashtag Imagine Justice Boston. And below are the Instagram handles for MassArt, the City of Boston, and then Chandra's program Artward Bound, and my program, the Center for Art and Community Partnerships. So with that, thank you so much for going with us on that journey, and love to hear your thoughts and questions and have conversation.
Great, thank you, Ceci and Chandra. Now would be the time when, if we were actually physically together, you would hear our appreciation. So I hope through this silly medium you can feel it. Questions can come from just about any way. You can put them in the chat. You can raise your virtual hand, raise your real hand, or we're not that huge a group. You can just speak up.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dave. So thanks for the love in the chat. Because I was doing the slides, I haven't quite read through all the questions yet. Should we just start and answer some of the questions in there?
If you see something in there, absolutely.
Sounds good. So Dave, you had the first question about being really interested to hear how the artists describe what impact is. Is it something you think it is measurable? And are you required to measure it? This is a really rich question, and similar to Olivia, your question about defining success in this work. What does it look like for us?
We thought about that, and we didn't want to be prescriptive. So we asked the artists to really answer these questions in their application, and we're basically using their application as their contract, as this is the work. So however you've defined it, we just want to support you in actualizing that. And we're working with Dunamis, who's going to be supporting them, and our coordinator. So every step of the way, every several months, we're having these conversations. We know that COVID is changing things, but we want to basically honor their intent. And if they feel like it's successful, then we feel like it's successful. Do you want to add to that, Cess?
Yeah, similar in spirit. So this was a very, very open process. Sometimes we thought, is it too open? But ultimately we thought, let's do a lot of learning in this first year of this multi-year process. The questions that we asked in the application, and mind you, just want to share that through the office hours, and through, we had a two-phase process for the large grants and a one application process for the smaller grants, and a lot of office hours, as Chandra mentioned, in between. Those office hours were actually opportunities for us as the core team to refine the questions we were asking in the final application. So it was radical for us in that sense, in that what regranting partner actually hears the questions that the artists are saying, that makes us realize, even with all the communities of people who helped us to build these questions, there's still a few tweaks to be made. What that led us to were questions, and also in partnership with Surdna, about explicitly asking the artist, what does power mean to you? And if you are successful, what shifts in power, what power shifts will take place in your community? And what will that mean for the folks in your community? And so this is where, that question of impact wasn't for us or for Surdna to define, but rather this iterative conversation with the artists, so that we truly are all learning in this year. So it's going to be really interesting to reflect on as they get going in their projects, and where they are a year from now. How have they defined power, and how has that power shifted? Now, success for us is it depends on who you ask. There are some folks who are kind of seeing this. They're not in the RIRJ core team or haven't been part of it, but they think that success would be a kind of shiny, highlighty project that they can market and share the highlights of. I don't know that that's success for us. It might be, that'd be nice. But at the same time, again, as Chandra said, the how and the process is as important as the product. And we also expect that in any endeavor where we're prototyping and we're experimenting, and the nature of being radical is we don't know how it's going to turn out. And so in some ways, faith in that process already feels successful. If we quote unquote fail, at least we haven't rejected ourselves. We haven't rejected our ideas, and we've supported the artists in bringing to life their ideas. So success is, I guess, in our mind's eye and heart. I think it's all the framework in which we approach it. I hope that helps.
I also think that that's radical. How many times can you go into an organization or an institution and kind of pitch ideas and then try it out? I think most folks have a low tolerance for failure, but that's where innovation happens, right? You've got to risk and prototype and try, and your best thing is not always the first thing. It's the 15th thing, with collaborators and other folks kind of poking at it and looking at it, right? So to do that from a policy standpoint, to do that from a process standpoint, and we're an institution. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're an institution, you're an institution, a school, and a partner to say, let's think outside the box. Let's empower the folks in the center of it to inform us. Let's see how that goes. And for me, for people to feel supported, for them to honor their wellness, their whole selves in this, to feel like they found community and to support their evolution as they make these things into the world, I think that's success. Because I will tell you this, racial justice, you can't put it on nobody to solve in 1 year. You can't put it on nobody, especially folks of color. It's a disrespectful ask. And I think a lot of times when folks of color are asked to come into a conversation or come into a group, they're supposed to crack the nut. I don't think that's fair. And so we're not going to put more pressure on them to do it. But what we can do is have a sustained conversation. And that's where I think people are asking about, like, how is the cohort? I think Cynthia is asking about, will this cohort help to bring in future cohorts? Yes, we are building a community. This is not pop it and drop it. This is, we're starting here, we're bringing here. We want to make change for real. And it takes all of us being part of this work. And we're figuring out what's a respectful ask of people's time and their commitment, and how do people want to be part of it, right? And we're also thinking about what it means for our own health and wellness, which we have not done so good at factoring in, because we work in 2, 3, 4, 5 jobs, but we're figuring that out. But how do we have the space to really think, right? So our year 2 and 3, might that be a 2-year opportunity where it could be a learning year, right? That we're really kind of learning and developing curriculum together. And then the next year is actually doing some projects. So we're kind of in that journey, but we're all kind of figuring together.
Another note about the success around even being radical as a partnership is you've got a city municipality, and as awesome as the public art college is, it's still a state bureaucracy. And so how to be radical within the context of these two massive public, very, very bureaucratic institutions are, as creative and amazing as they can be too, they are super bureaucratic. So if anything, working for the state for the last 11 years, it's a constant process of questioning and re-questioning, because we also don't want to be inventing new wheels all the time. But if we're borrowing from what already exists from a city municipality and a state institution, we really have to question, is this radical? Particularly around issues of budgets and money. That's a tough one. Thanks for all the love in the chat. I'm glad that some of you are sharing. This has been energizing. There's a question here about, will the current cohort help bring in and assist with future cohorts? How do we envision this? We've envisioned this in multiple ways. And in fact, we already, if you do take a look at our January 22nd celebration, which is on our website, we asked 2 of our MCs, Shervina Geraldo, who's a junior in a Boston Public High School, and Karen Young, who is an artist and activist. They were our MCs for the event. And I think that they sort of represent, we've been working with them now for the better part of a year. They were on our street team, on our advisory group, and both of them were on the 2 different panels for this process. So inviting them to be our MCs for the event, we're really thinking about how people who have grown with us and have helped to co-build this opportunity, how can they also be a part of evaluation? So there's the kind of cohort sense in that way. Those who have helped build it can continue to evolve it. And Chandra, did you want to say something?
One little piece we haven't mentioned, and you talked about evaluation. Do you want to say a little bit about PAR?
Hold on 1 minute. 1 minute. But in terms of, Cynthia, your question about future cohorts, we think that Chandra mentioned the seeding of the $1,000 grantees. We definitely think that not just the smaller grant amounts, but this process of having the artists who are getting the 1,000 have been opting into being in this cohort with us together. And we see a lot of potential for how artists from this year can both build behind the scenes for future years, because they'll be central to our evaluation. There could also be ways that they actually lead focus groups or lead future cohorts. We have all kinds of ideas about how this might work. Because it's like any groups of cohorts, right? Like, how do those who have been involved in the process help to build what comes for who those are in the cohort for the future? Chandra, do you want to talk about PAR? There's
so much, it's so rich. Participatory participatory action research. So that's another place that we want to go. We're going to be introducing this opportunity to our cohort of artists. We didn't want to put too much on them at first because we're just building out so much. But this idea of empowering the folks who live in the communities to actually do the research, tell the stories is important. And also to make sure that those storytellers are connected to institutions such as MassArt, such as the city, because oftentimes the people who tell the story actually kind of write the rules, and they're usually from outside the community. So we want to kind of think about how to shape that and change that dynamic. So more to come on that, but it's just something that we're thinking about as we think about policy and we think about curriculum.
Any other questions in the chat, or does anybody want to ask their question?
A quick question, and that is the changes you've seen in your artists, because I think what you're doing in the space you're creating is so amazing, and it allows them to decompartmentalize themselves when they come to a space and be able to create. And I just wondered what kind of changes you've seen in them.
Chandra, can you answer that?
Yeah, I think the main thing, and I think it would have happened before COVID, is just vulnerability. People being so vulnerable at every step of the way, in the office hours about pitching their ideas, to being part of the cohort and saying, you know, what they need, trying to figure out what it really means to center well-being and joy in a time that is so contentious and uninspiring, right? To have felt the onslaught of everything that's happened this summer and that continues to happen on a daily basis, and still show up and be vulnerable and say, I don't know about how to deal with this today. And sharing that vulnerability with their community to say that's okay. That has been something that's interesting. And also having folks who are usually the people who have the answers, for them to sit back and be okay not knowing, right? You know, as a professor, I'm supposed to know, you know, I don't know everything. I'm learning from you. And to have that be a great place to start conversations. Right? That we're all bringing the knowledge that we have. We're all unique. We all have something to contribute. It's all of value. That has been something that has been consistent. And for the artists themselves and the people involved in the process, they've been like, this is different. This feels different. I feel different. You know, that's hard to do in many places and do it consistently, because you can do it maybe once, maybe twice, but to have it be the consistent thing that people feel, that's different.